Hi there, guys. Welcome back to the Drop the Amen Breaks podcast. I'm your host, Aaron from amenbreaks.co.uk, and today we're going to be talking about how drum and bass artists can create revenue with their music. As ever, guys, we are the only spoken word drum and bass podcast online. Make sure you subscribe, check us out on all major streaming platforms. So, let's get into it. Now this topic is particularly interesting considering that we are in a lockdown situation where traditional revenue streams are completely dried up, touring and that sort of thing. So what I really want to cover today is stuff like, the revenue models that people currently have. Last week we looked at, do artists actually need to have record labels and things like that, and what sort of impacts they have in terms of their relationship with artists and stuff. So this week we're going to be looking at something that probably isn't talked about all that much, or something that artists feel or experience quite a bit, but don't necessarily know what to do about it. All artists have now found themselves in a position where they've just got no work. Now, for the mega famous artists, that doesn't really matter all that much because they've probably got enough sort of funds and cash reserves for them to be able to do stuff. And we have seen, artists raising a lot of money for the NHS. We've seen them raising money for doing live streams for other bits and pieces. DJ EZ did a 24-hour live set, which was awesome. You should definitely go and check that out. And other artists are doing live streams and things like that. They seem to have petered off a little bit. I know that Hospital and Ram, the ever highly talked about Hospital and Ram, have been doing live sets or recording sets so that they can do their house party sessions and things like that, which is great, but it does seem that they've sort of petered off a little bit, and they're probably facing a little bit of sort of lockdown fatigue. Everyone was really feeling the spirit a little bit, or a lot really, at the start of things, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay, we've been here for like 2-3 months now, and I'm doing all this live streaming stuff and, probably gaining quite a bit of support or following or things like that. And we were able to generate some revenue and cash for, for these other, these other charities and the NHS, which, by the way, is not a charity. So, they're all these sort of working artists, not to say that all artists aren't working, but, for want of a better terminology, working class artists are, finding it really tough now to support themselves, to generate revenue. And, again, if you're not a big artist, if you're not an artist who's on one of the bigger labels, and you don't have a deal where you're getting paid for XYZ, then, you find yourself in quite a bit of trouble. So realistically, artists are looking towards other streaming options. I'm sort of giving it away there. Other options in terms of generating revenue. Now, obviously, one of the things that a lot of artists hope that generate them a lot of money, but typically don't, and I'll give you some facts and figures in a minute, is through the use of services like Spotify, through Tidal, Napster, stuff like that. Yeah, remember Napster? Yeah, apparently they're still going. And the object behind using a platform like that is that people stream your songs, and then after a certain amount of songs that get streamed, you get to earn some money. Now, that all in theory sounds like a good idea. You get your music up there, you get signed up as an artist, somebody plays it, and you theoretically get some money for it. But the challenge that artists have, especially if they're not bigger artists, and don't forget, guys, like, we're talking about the drum and bass community here. The drum and bass community, although very enthusiastic, although very dedicated, to their scene. You know, people will go out of their way to spend money on going to raves. People will go out of their way to go and see their favorite artists and, you know, even buy merch and stuff like that. It is still not really, you know, a lucrative music scene to be into, you know. And again, we're talking in huge contrast here. You know, you look at artists like, you know, big pop artists like Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber. And again, I know that we covered them last week as well. We'll use them as examples. But, you know, these guys are huge, absolutely massive, okay? One of Justin Bieber's songs, I can't remember what one it was, Love Yourself, maybe, was the first stream or the first video on YouTube to generate 1 billion streams, okay? Now, YouTube, I think, charges, or rather pays out something like, I don't know, 20 cents. Let me just see if I can find that, find out the actual figures for this. Nah, sorry, quite low. YouTube offers about 7 cents per 100 plays. Okay, so let's just do some quick math. So 1 billion. Sorry, I'm just using a computer here to do the maths because my maths is terrible. Sorry. So 1 billion times 7 cents. Okay, so that's something like $70,000. You know, it's not all that much money. Again, sorry, you have to bear with me here. I'm just doing some maths and my maths is terrible. So, all right, so 1, 2, 3, that's 1,000, 1, 2, 3, that's 1 million, 1, 2, 3, that's 1 billion. And then times that by 0.7. Okay, actually, no, it's considerably more. It's like 700,000. Okay. Sorry, guys. Some real life problems here. You know, so all right, so they, you know, that stream would have generated $700,000. Okay. I have no idea what the stream is up to now, but it's still, you know, quite large. You know, $700,000 generated from one stream, but that is that's Justin Bieber, right? Like one of the biggest artists of the past decade. Okay. And say what you like about him, whether you like him as a person, whether you like his music or not, it's neither here nor there. The fact is that the guy is everywhere. He is more than a household name in every country, right? So that stream generated, let's say, $700,000 from being played on YouTube. Okay, I don't know how much he would have made out of that. I don't know what the split is. Whatever. The point is that $700,000 for somebody who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars is not really all that much money. So even a massive stream like that, possibly even 7 million, I don't know, you know, is not really all that much money if you consider how much money is actually generated from, you know, record deals and, you know, digital downloads and stuff like that all together. So imagine that you are, you know, a drum and bass artist, if you're a producer or a DJ, and you're signed to a label. You're going to be making some decent money, right? You know, it's obviously enough for you to live. You know, that's your career, that's your job, right? But you're not going to be going out buying Ferraris anytime soon. You're not going to be making loads of money. So the revenue streams that artists have to rely on are, of course, you know, where the real money is made is playing shows, okay? Traditionally, anyway. I mean, there's lots of arguments that, I can't remember who it was, there's a big artist a little while ago that said, you know, artists don't make any money through releasing music, they make money through touring, okay? And there's probably an element of truth in that, but there's also, you know, the revenue streams that these guys make or have to try and work with. You know, in this situation that we're in now, becomes difficult for them. Their main avenue for generating funds is through touring, okay, it's through playing gigs, playing sets and stuff like that. And so, like I said, there's a little bit of sort of live stream fatigue now it seems to have sort of bottomed out a little bit. There's still artists doing live streams. There's a lot of, DJs who haven't, made their name or reputation or been signed to a label who are still doing loads of live streams, and they're all still very good. I'm not taking anything away from them. But what I am saying is that, people have become a little bit sort of fatigued by it because they're putting all their hard work in for free. So, it comes down, this is something that we posed a question to a little while ago to our followers on Instagram. It's a tricky one, right? Because artists need to make a living, right? And they make a living by having people pay them to perform. But if they're doing all this stuff for free, then people are like, well, yeah, cool, that's free, I'll tune in, yada, yada, yada. But for theoretically, they'd normally be paid for this sort of stuff. So in this instance, would you, as a consumer of drum and bass, be happy to pay a nominal fee, even if it's like $2 or $3, £2 or £3, whatever, for listening to an exclusive live set that includes new music, right? Let's say, I don't know, Andy C. Let's say Andy C said, I'm going to put on a 3-hour set for you, and it's going to include some new music, and it's going to be streamed live, but you have to pay even £2-3 to view it, okay? And there'll be a paywall, and you'll get a link, and the only way that you can access it is by paying, and yada yada yada. I don't know how people would feel about that. I don't think that people would sit there and go, yeah, okay, I'm happy to pay £2-3 because they've been inundated with free stuff already. So, let's say that as an artist, you set this up and what have you, Andy C, let's say that you'll have like 5,000 people join in or tune in to watch that live set. And he charges them only £1, right? That's £5,000 that he's generated, minus your fees, to whatever streaming service you've used and having to pay someone to set it all up, yada, yada, yada. His take home is probably going to be, I don't know, 3,500, and then tax, etc., etc., etc. So maybe he's making the same amount of money that he would for a gig. I don't know. I don't know how much DJs get paid, especially the top echelon of the drum and bass community. But people are quite happy to spend €100 for a ticket to Rampage, and fly out there and pay for accommodation and stuff like that. But to see an artist live doing an exclusive set, they probably wouldn't be so keen to pay £1 or £2 to support them. And so the revenue models that these people are looking at are quite it's quite tricky, right? But begs the question of why would people be reluctant to spend money on on a £2 so that they could listen to their favorite drum and bass artist in in a live set. They'd normally pay much more, and maybe it's the experience. Maybe people feel that the experience is devalued because they're not actually there. They're not actually getting that full experience, despite the fact that that person is still outlaying the full extent of their skills and talent and hard work over X amount of years. So it's quite a tricky one for artists to work with, right? And so the streaming revenue model isn't really all that viable for artists who aren't global names. I mean, people like Netsky, most people have probably heard of Netsky because of the fact that he's a big artist and he's moved into different areas and he's done some collaborations with some big artists and stuff. They might have heard of Netsky, but they won't really know him. They might have heard of Andy C, especially in the UK, because everyone knows drum and bass, and they will know at least somebody that is huge like that, or Goldie, someone like that. But again, these people aren't global household names, and even in across Europe, places like Australia and New Zealand, the community is small. In Russia, so in these sorts of areas, the community is small in comparison, and so even a track. Again, let's just have a quick look at something. I'm just going to go onto YouTube, right? Let's have a look at Netsky Rio. Okay, so Netsky Rio, everyone loves that tune. It's a huge hit in the drum and bass community. This, the official video for Netsky Rio has 12 million views. Okay, so let's just go 12. Whoops, let's just do some more quick math. 12 million times by 0.7 is 8,400,000. Okay, theoretically, oh no, sorry, that would be for one stream. Okay, so we have to divide that by 100 because they only pay out per 100 streams. So it's only $84,000. Okay, and again, YouTube is probably taking a percentage of that. Whatever. Again, like $84,000. That's going to be spread across Netsky. That's going to be spread across Digital Farm Animals. That's going to be spread across whoever else was part of the label and things like that. So yeah, that was a pretty big, pretty big track. It would have earned quite a bit of money. But let's just take a look at another one. Okay, Netsky every day. So that one's got, okay, so that one's, but look, this was 9 years ago. Okay, so this is put on the UKF drum and bass page, 29 million views 9 years ago. Okay, 9 years ago. So this isn't just per month, like this is overall total. So 29, 1, 2, 3, divided, 29 million times 0.7, which is the average that YouTube pay per 100 streams, is, let's get the computer working for us, and then divide that by 100. Okay, so that's $203,000. Okay, in 10 years, that track has made $203,000. So 203,000 divided by 10, which means that track on the Rusko Everyday Netsky remix that was posted on the UKF Drum and Bass YouTube channel in 9 years has 29 million views, which over the course of 9 years has generated about $20,000 per year. Okay, to put that in perspective, that is not a livable wage. Okay, in 10 years, that track has earned under the average UK household take-home. All right, if you consider that the average UK household take-home per year is 24,000. Okay, that's less than that. All right, if you were just reliant on that one track, you're on the breadline. Okay, so even a massive artist like Netsky, and don't forget Rusko is going to be taking a bit out of this. UKF is taking some of this. Netsky's taking some of this. I don't know whatever label is that, you're probably not taking all that much money home from that track. You're probably taking, I don't know, maybe like $1,000 a year out of that. So you're not really earning all that much money from it. And these are big name artists within the drum and bass community. So imagine what the options are for people who aren't as huge as Netsky, So realistically, what are the options that these guys have? Streaming has sort of represented a false dawn. Everyone's been banging on about the democratization of the internet, but realistically, what's happened is you've just had these major platforms like Tidal and Napster and Amazon and Apple and Spotify, who have simply become new gatekeepers. What they've said is, hey guys, all our premium users, and to be fair, Spotify and other platforms allow higher percentages paid by premium users, but there are also an awful lot of free users. I dare say there was probably more free users on Spotify than there are paid users, because you can still get full access to the entire music network. You just don't have as many functionalities, right? So you can't just play whatever song you want. You've got to go to a playlist and skip through and yada, yada, yada. You're limited to 6 skips an hour and there's adverts and stuff. It's a minor inconvenience, really, for someone to listen to an entire civilization's worth of music, right? I mean, there's pretty much everything on there. There's a limitless supply of music and there's more stuff being added every single day. And so, for the fact that they pay out something like 19 cents per 100 streams for people who aren't, I don't know, per 600 streams for people who aren't premium users, and 19 cents per 100 if you are a premium user, like, you're still not making much money out there. So even if you're a popular artist, even if you're generating, hundreds of thousands of streams, you're still not really making all that much money out of it. It's not, not a livable wage from streaming, and let's say you're on Beatport and you're on, all these other ones, you're not really making that much money. So these gatekeepers are still taking a huge chunk of money that theoretically should be, and arguably should be, given to these artists. Because at the end of the day, all these platforms have done is just put that track on their platform. They've done nothing, absolutely nothing, to ensure that that music is there. They've just provided a platform for people. So how is it right and how is it fair that these massive platforms are taking the lion's share of it? It just doesn't make all that much sense. So, when you look at the revenue options, obviously the main one is, getting people to generate revenue through live gigs and stuff like that, because at least, there's more money that can be generated from people turning up, etc., etc., etc. So, the streaming thing, like I say, is not really as good for artists as the platforms would make you believe. But then you look at things like, iTunes, where you can download albums, pay for them. And we'll get onto albums in a second, because, it seems like that, well, hang on, I'll come back to that. So, the albums that people download, they're like $10. Theoretically, artists can generate quite a bit of cash from that. And of course, again, this goes back to our podcast last week, right? Where, a label is able to promote your album a lot better. They're able to get it in the right channels, and you're more likely to see a larger volume of downloads happening of your album. But especially in the drum and bass community, people don't put out albums all that much. You see a lot more EPs, and definitely loads more tracks, and again, that's through collaboration, signing to different labels and stuff like that. It seems to be a more viable way to generate revenue by creating single tracks and pumping those out than it is to actually, create an album, because, the money just isn't there. People, with the advent of streaming, and I'm funny like this, right? Because I've always been an album kind of person. I grew up in the time when you couldn't really buy singles. I mean, you could, cassettes and CDs and stuff like that, but they were quite expensive to produce. So if you were just producing them, then you'd want to make sure there was something on there for people to listen to that was worth them shelling out their cash for, right? So when people were buying, CDs and albums and cassettes and things like that, then you were, it was worth the money. It would be like this whole sort of, experience that you'd buy. And buying an album was worth the money. But with the advent of streaming, people were like, well, I can listen to this song or this song or this song or this song, and it sort of categorized many things in ways that they shouldn't necessarily need to be or should be categorized in, because all of a sudden, it's just like how many streams you can get. In fact, there was, we're going down a slight tangent here, and we'll get back to, albums and stuff like that in a sec. But there was, I can't remember who it was, Little Pump maybe, or Little Yachty, I don't know. He's got one of the shortest songs, like one of the shortest hip hop songs. It's only like 2 minutes 30. Who was it that did Gucci Gang? I don't know. Whoever did Gucci Gang, right? The artists are sort of being trained a little bit to produce shorter and shorter songs, because if it's a short song, then it gets streamed more, and so therefore theoretically generates more revenue, because it doesn't take as long to stream, so people don't have to listen to it, for as long. Which sounds a bit weird, right? Because if you like a song, then you'd want to listen to it. But we've been trained to just skip, train through, go through all these different ones. And so, like I say, the the streaming platforms don't really represent much value to artists anymore. So, when you look at revenue channels, streaming, unless you're a massive artist, really isn't one for you. And then, producing an album, again, because people are only streaming songs, they're not necessarily streaming whole albums. I don't even know if you can stream a whole album. I imagine you can on Spotify as a premium user. But, there just doesn't seem to be much point. You'd much rather get your biggest hits, your top tracks, and try and get as many streams and revenue as you can out of these platforms. So, I'm an old school head, right? I like to listen to albums. I like to have albums on my phone. I don't necessarily like to have just single tracks. It kind of spoils the feel for me. I like to get into the experience of listening to the track. And a prime example of this is Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, right? Each song on that album is fine by itself. They're all cracking tunes, amazing, groundbreaking tunes. But you listen to it as an album and it's just an entirely different experience. And that's why people bought the album, because of the experience that they got. You probably could buy singles from it, but people didn't. People bought the vinyl. People bought the album because that was the best way to experience it. Is streaming the best way to experience things now? I don't know. It's still it's convenient for sure. But is it the best way? I don't know. I'll leave that up to everybody else to decide. So streaming isn't really a decent revenue generator for drum and bass artists, at least anyway. So then you have to start looking at, what other options are there? And we've seen a huge influx of users of Patreon, okay? If you don't know what Patreon is basically a monthly subscription service for artists, creators, who can offer up additional music or things like that. Like I know the Teddy Killers, for example, you can sign up to their Patreon account for like $100 a month, right? And they do live music production sessions. They offer exclusive remixes and tracks, and you can actually speak to them and stuff like that. And so you now start to look at different ways that they're starting to utilize their skills, right? So in the past, they could produce music and they could play music, but now they're actually having to really dig down into different things. Like if you pay us $100 a month to be a patron of us, we'll give you exclusive content, right? So that is a good way of generating additional revenue, right? But what that means is that's additional work. You have to start doing more work to earn more money, which isn't necessarily the thing that people want to do, artists want to do. Look, in this particular global situation, it's not a bad thing because people have time on their hands. I mean, I would quite happily pay some money for a session with Next Guy to learn how he creates his music. On Producer Tech, you can find people like Rezo who do tutorials and things like that, of which they would have been paid for. But again, is that necessarily something that all these artists want to be able to do? And what happens if everyone starts to do it, right? Let's say that everyone on Hospital starts to do these things. I mean, there's a certain amount of crossover, right? There's only so many ways that you can tune a kick drum. There's only so many ways that you can layer a snare. There's only so many ways that you can create sounds in Massive or Serum or FM8 or something like that. There is a certain amount of work that you have to do to create sounds in Operator and Ableton, but at the end of the day, a lot of it then eventually comes down to, well, this is the basics of it. You have to go away and work on it your own. Okay, it's like with anything. If you play a musical instrument, here are the keys, here are the things that you need to do to make this sound. But ultimately, after a while, you've got to go and figure it out yourself, okay? In order for you to progress, you've got to do different stuff and you've got to work on it yourself and do that. And so, this sort of cycle happens again. eventually what you'd find is that if so many artists were simply, just producing all of these music production videos and things like that, then, what would be the value in them? Okay, so you'd get, a more detailed look at the tuning or the sound that these particular artists create. But, again, eventually it would become saturated, and therefore there wouldn't really be much need for it. I mean, it's great, right? Because these sorts of things can go out on all these platforms, and, who's to say that there won't be an influx of these sorts of things? But realistically, artists don't have all that much time all the time to be producing these sorts of these tutorials. But on the other side of that, they do represent a good opportunity for people to learn from these experts. They do, and look, the world of music production is infinite, right? There's X amount of plugins. There's a few major doors that people can use, and each one of them has their own nuances and particular systems of how they can be used and things like that. So there is an element that these people can simply, continue to create and things like that. There's, it's an infinite amount of stuff that you can do. So, there is that element there that if you create a particular sound and you use a particular tool to do it, then these video productions that production videos that you create will be available for you to generate revenue all the time. But with that then comes, look, again, there's two flip sides to this, right? So if you're generating production videos and let's say that you created one 2 years ago when Ableton 9 was out, well, then you could do a similar one and see how the system has changed, okay? Now, don't forget, in fact, there was something that I heard when I was listening to London Electricity's podcast. And it was when he was struggling with, I think it was the Building Better Worlds tune on his album, Building Better Worlds. And he said that he started like 10 years ago and he'd had all the files, but he'd never done anything with it because he was finding it difficult to get a melody to go with it and stuff like that. And he looked at it and he was like, oh, wow, apparently 10 years ago, all the rage was to layer snares up to make a really chunky, tubby sound. So production techniques do change, and there is that element of, evolution within that you can always go back and, look at how things have changed and whether or not that's the way to do it and stuff like that. So these videos do represent an opportunity, but again, we're looking at the established artist here. This is for your Netskyes, this is for your London Electricities, this is for your, Wilkinsons and Rezos and, Icicle and Mephius. Just pulling a few names out of my head. That's not to say that there aren't more people out there doing all these sorts of things, but, if you're one of those working, for want of a better term, as I said before, if you're a working class artist, right, you might not necessarily have the capability to produce that sort of thing. You might just be, laying something down with a guitar or, piano or something like that. And what if you're not a producer? What if you're just a DJ? And you don't have the equipment or the technical know-how or the skills to be able to record how you DJ. And what value is that to someone who's learning how to DJ if you're still up and coming yourself? There are DJ courses out there. There are people out there who can teach you how to DJ. Sure. Some of them are famous. Most of them are not. But if you're, like I say, a working class artist and you rely on your skills to be able to generate revenue from the music that you make or the the sets that you play and stuff like that, then how are you supposed to generate revenue through creating a video that you don't really know how to do or may not even be sort of refined enough to be able to do that? It's and a lot of people wouldn't be able to explain it either, because being able to do something is one thing, but being able to teach somebody else how to do it is entirely another. And the way that you learn how to do things is not necessarily the way that it should be taught. There could be an easier way of how to look at these sorts of things. And again, the way you then go and describe and demonstrate how all of this works might not be the right fit for everyone. So, on the one hand, creating these music production, these, how-to videos, tutorials, things like that, they're really, really potentially valuable to people. I mean, look, if London Electricity put out a course on how to produce music, people would buy it. Of course they would. But, if, again, working class artist put something together, do they have the audience base, the fan base, to make that money from them? If they don't, they've got to look at how they can get that set up. They've got to find somebody to help them. They've got to make a recording. They've got to edit it. All this stuff that costs money for them to do. All right, so it's theoretically an investment, but at this moment in time, do they have that investment available to them? If you're going to create something, then you'd want to create something good. As we've already said, the world of drum and bass has nefariously high production standards, and you want to be seen as an artist to be producing at that same level. So it's not, they could be viable options for people to generate revenue, but they could also not be viable options for people to generate revenue. So what other ways are there? Well, we've looked at a couple of ways at this moment in time of people having to do it, artists having to do it themselves. But really, I think the biggest sort of issue here is the appropriation of attribution, copyright laws, stuff like that, right? Let's say that you're an artist and you create a track. Okay, you're not an artist that is necessarily signed to a label. You're not an artist that is making it big, but you've just created a track that a lot of artists want to play. Now, not theoretically, you should be getting paid for every live performance of that to the public, at least. Okay, so if you get that played on the radio, you get some money. Okay, if you get that played in a club, you should be getting some money. If you get that played at a festival, you should be getting some money. So, but it doesn't always work like that, right? Because if a DJ has it in a set and they go to some Eastern European country and they don't have one of these, digital black box audio recorder things, and the festival isn't signed up to some sort of music appropriation license system, then you're not going to get paid any money for that. And again, there's challenges with those systems as well, right? In that, people sign up to these things and they have these licenses, but, theoretically, you're not going to be getting much money out of that because it's sort of distributed from revenue generated to artists in a percentage wise. So your track gets played, it gets heard, and theoretically you get paid for that. But the funds that are, the people that are paying for those licenses for this system in place so that they can appropriate the money correctly, it's probably not going to the right people all the time. And again, the database that these people will have to have is massive, and that's not always possible to do. So, there is a larger problem here in that artists always seem to be getting a bum deal unless they are, super well known. And the bigger challenge that seems to be arising here is that these large companies like Spotify and Apple and Amazon and Tidal and stuff like that, Deezer, they're just gatekeepers, right? And they seem to be trying to make the audio industry more democratized, but realistically all they're doing is just the same sort of stuff that that has always been going on. They don't want to pay artists what they're owed, and this is categorically true because in the US a few years ago there was a court case where artists were lobbying for, larger revenue shares to be distributed on streaming platforms, and all the major platforms except Apple opposed it. Why would they do that? They're supposed to be democratizing things. They're just trying to make it more difficult for people to generate revenue. So, it seems like whatever way you turn, it's tough for people to generate revenue. Artists rely pretty much on themselves to do that. Now, you can look at, there are other artists out there. Bassclef, for example, has a course that teaches you how to become a successful musician. Now, Bassclef is, of course, a successful musician in, future bass, in techno, under a different name. And theoretically, if you follow that model, then you can become a successful artist. But again, this is, you've got to take this all with a pinch of salt. He can say that looking back on a 10, 15, 20-year career of having to graft really hard and, learning loads of mistakes that shouldn't really be happening. And is he making money from his music? Is he making revenue from producing music? Well, not from that course, no, because he's taking a different aspect of it and teaching the business side of music to up-and-coming artists or people who want to make a music career their full time. There are, so we say, there's lots of ways for people to generate revenue. I mean, again, theoretically, you can make money through streaming. You can make money through selling your albums. You can make money through your Patreon account. You can make money through production tutorials and stuff like that. But only two of those ways at this moment in time are actually for generating your own music, okay? There is, of course, another route that artists could go down. This is probably not a great example, but, the Hospital team, they wrote a lot of tracks for the Need for Speed Forza game, okay? There was obviously some deal there. They were approached by the Need for Speed studio, and they were paid X amount for their artists to generate music for that, okay? So the other way that people can do that, artists can do that, is to go down the corporate route. They can produce music for films. They can produce music for TV and radio. They can be ghostwriters. But, again, that's not really generating revenue for their music. Now, I didn't necessarily say that this was a podcast about how artists can make revenue from their music. I said it was a podcast about the revenue options that people have. But again, you look at the way that the world is at this moment in time, people seem to find that there's not a lot of, production going on in terms of TV at this moment in time. I know stuff is starting to open up elsewhere in the world. There's not a lot of stuff going on in the world of games production. Artists who rely on that are, struggling. And also, it's not necessarily a way that an artist wants to generate their music. There is a little bit of snobbery, I don't know if that's the right words, of artists who go down that corporate route. Oh, you've sold out, man. Well, yeah, sort of, but in the same way that John Williams has sold out, right? Because John Williams, one of the most famous composers of modern day music, who, if you don't know who John Williams is, get to know. Big ups John Williams. John Williams produced music, the theme tune for the Harry Potter movies. He produced the music for the Star Wars theme, like all of these major movie franchises that he produced that music. And he's a classical composer, right? But his job, he made most of his money from writing the theme tune from Star Wars. So, or well, not necessarily just from Star Wars, but from major music, movies and things like that. Does that make him a sellout? Well, not really. Do other classical composers think that he's a sellout? I don't know. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of the classical world. But what I do know is that it's a legitimate option for classical composers. I mean, think about how hard it is for drum and bass composers, right? Think about how hard it must be for people who create classical style music. You know, I wouldn't even know where to begin on that sort of area. So there is another option for people to generate revenue. You know, it's not just all about the gigs. It's not just all about the festivals and stuff like that. There are other options. People do have an option to generate revenue through streaming. It's not a very good one. People do have an option to generate revenue through selling their albums and their tracks. Is that a good one? It depends on how big you are as an artist. It depends what size your fan base is. Can you sell your skills, as it were, in terms of music production, videos, things like that? Well, yeah, you can. Will it generate you a lot of money? Well, it depends. You know, if you look at stuff like music producer or producertech.com, they sell their courses for like £10 a month. Okay, and if you go on there and you have a membership for £10 a month, you have access to all of these videos. Now, for example, I know that Rezo has done a load of stuff on music on Producer Tech. You can see, how he created Move, one of his famous tracks. You can see how he does sound design. This is just one artist on there. There's loads of stuff, loads and loads of stuff on there. And people are paying £10 a month for it. And, do you think that his skill set and his production technique is worth more than £10 a month? Well, yeah, of course. And how much money did he make out of that? How much money is he making out of that? Again, it's debatable. When you look at revenue models, having said that, though, if you've got a little bit of money coming in from several different streams, then, you start to make a decent bit of money. But you have to really have been putting a lot of work in to do all those sorts of things. So, streaming, Patreon. Let's just move away from the streaming and the album sales and things like that, because that's like and of course gigs and stuff. That's a traditional way of making money for artists, right? That's theoretically the easiest way for them to make money, because that's their bread and butter. That's what they've trained to do. That's how they generally make their money, right? But in order for them to make extra money, or something that's worth, livable, or not worth livable, but something that is livable for them, they have to put a whole lot more work into what it is they can do. So if you consider that we go back to normality, right, and there are plenty of working class artists out there who are generating, I don't know, £2,000 to £3,000 a month if they're self-employed, or if they're on a label, then, they're still getting taxed, and everyone still has to pay bills and rent and food and travel and stuff like that. They're making money, they're livable, it's livable wage for them. And again, we're not talking about your Netsky's, we're not talking about your your Andy C's and your London Electricities and what have you. We're talking about your working class artists, the people who, are popular, but are out there grinding and having to travel everywhere and make money through playing sets and stuff like that. These people, they're making money, and they are generating enough money for them to live a life as a musician. They don't have to do anything else other than be a musician. This is what we're talking about here now. So these people that are doing this kind of stuff, they don't have time to sit down and produce courses. Because if they're in the entertainment business, right? And okay, so when venues open up again, you can go to a venue in the middle of winter because it's inside. You can perform all year round, but you make most of your money as an artist doing the festival circuit. Okay, if you're a drum and bass artist, you want to be, and we've written a really cool article on our website about the top drum and bass festivals in Europe. Please go and check that out. That tells you everything you want to know. But let's say that as an artist that you want to play the circuit. Okay, so there's there's all the festivals in the UK that will play drum and bass. You're looking at the big ones like Boomtown. You're looking at stuff like Glastonbury that has a dance village where drum and bass artists are there all the time. You've got your Isle of Wight, you've got your Festival, possibly stuff like Tea in the Park. They might have a set in there. Hospitality, but you're pretty much only going to be invited to that to play if you're on the Hospital label. You've got your Let It Rolls, you have Rampage, you have Innovation in the Dam, you have Sun and Bass, you have what's the one that they do, Hospitality on the Beach, but again, you're pretty much only going to be invited to that one if you are on Hospital. But again, these are top line festivals, right? So you as an artist need to be somewhere near that sort of level in order for you to be invited to these things. And yeah, okay, you will go and do world tours and stuff like that, and it will be back to back to back to back to back. You know, every weekend for like 12 weeks, you'll be flown to places, well, maybe even more than that, you know, starting from, let's say, April, you'll start to get flown around the world or go to these things all the way through until September. So April, May, June, July, August, September. So let's push it out. Let's say 6 months of the year, you have to be touring, okay? 6 months of the year, you're going from one place to the other, flying around, doing sets, you know, doing festivals, touring, that sort of thing. Okay, that's where you make your money, right? You don't have time to produce exclusive content for Producer Tech. You don't have time to produce exclusive stuff for your Patreon account. You don't have time to do all these other different bits and pieces because, firstly, you're touring, and secondly, you're knackered. You don't want to be sat there, you know, producing all these, you know, different bits and pieces. You don't want to have to be generating, you know, stuff for video games or films or things like that. You know, it's just not a viable option, really. So, you know, there are other options out there for artists, right? Like I say, the working class artists make their money through gigs and touring. Okay, that's pretty much it. There is, of course, the merch side of things, but you know, selling merch, you need to have a deal with somebody. There are different models out there available for people to do that, but again, it all comes with an investment, right? I've often heard Brian G on the V Recordings podcast talking about the merch that they generate. You know, they'll buy X amount of hoodies or T-shirts or something like that, and then they'll buy them in, and then when they're sold, and then they might buy some more and stuff like that. He said that you know, people were asking about a particular hoodie, and then they got a load in, and then they didn't sell them all. And he was like, well, you know, what's that? You know, that's a sunk cost. But again, that's only realistically an option if you are one of the brands, or, you know, i.e. one of the brands that is a label, or you're a big name artist. So you know, I kind of sort of turned this podcast into something that was supposed to be, well, here are some good ways for artists to make money, and actually just talking about how hard this is for artists, and, you know, how undervalued they really are for all the hard work and effort that they put in, you know. Again, you will have heard me talking, I've worked in the corporate world for, you know, almost 10 years, and you know, you're constantly getting people who are trying to undercut you or trying to think that, oh, you know, it's only a small job, it doesn't take long for you to do it, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, there is that old mantra, and it's like, well, yeah, it only takes me 30 minutes to do it, but it's taken me 10 years how to work out how to make this a 30-minute job. You know, you're not paying me for the 30 minutes worth of work, you're paying me for the skill set that it's taken me 10 years to learn how to do this 30-minute job for you. And that's what a lot of people don't seem to realise, you know. The 10,000 hour rule, I worked it out the other day, 10,000 hours is about 5 years, you know, and so if you were, it's impossible for you to do, there's 8,000 and something hours in a year, but that's, you know, 24 hours, 7 days a week, over 365 days, right? That's how many actual hours there are in a year. But obviously you're not going to be doing something 24 hours a day for an entire year. It's just not possible. So what you'll find is that you're probably looking about between like 5 and 10 years to actually master a craft. 5 and 10 years to actually get something, you know, professional out of your skill set and ability. So, you know, music artists are massively underappreciated and undervalued, despite the fact they're given huge status within our community. So, you know, going back to the question of, would you be put out if you were paying, you know, £2 for a live stream of an artist? You know, why would you feel aggrieved to do that? Which, by the way, is actually another option for people. You know, Facebook have said that they're going to be introducing the option for people to have paywalls on their live stream. So, you know, that might be a viable option. But again, that comes down to the community. Would there be backlash from the community? Oh, you were doing this all for free. Why should I now pay you £2 to watch you do something that I've been watching you all, you know, all spring do for nothing? And again, that's an attitude change. And there really is a huge issue here in the way that we look at artists and what we pay them for the work that they do. And it is incredibly important. You know, you look at our culture, you look at the drum and bass culture and all the hard work and effort that goes into it. You know, we define ourselves as a community, as a dance scene, by the music that was created, and yet several of these people didn't really get all that much. I remember after Marcus Intalex died, there was a GoFundMe set up for his funeral. You know, funerals are like $5-6 grand in the UK. And Marcus Intalex, one of the most influential drum and bass artists, okay, you know, the person that had a subgenre named after him. You know, he was the original purveyor of what was originally known as liquid funk. You know, if you go back and see the Red Bull, you know, the Red Bull Music Academy video that he did in like 2003 or something like that. You know, he was like, oh, you know, people calling it all kinds of names like liquid funk. Like, what is liquid funk? Go back and watch it. It's amazing. And there's another thing we'll get to about Red Bull Music Academy as well in a second. And the commercialization of music and events and things like that. You know, this guy who had a subgenre named after him had to have a GoFundMe set up so that his family could afford to give him a proper funeral. Like, how is that fair? How is that fair that, you know, one of the most influentially cultural significant artists of our scene apparently didn't have cash reserves enough to be able to have a proper funeral? And I don't mean any disrespect at all. I'm not looking down on anybody, and I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way at all, right? Because, you know, invariably there'll be someone that says, oh, you're being disrespectful, yada, yada. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm talking about the truth. And that is the truth, you know. Somebody who is that influential, somebody who has that much impact on our lives, somebody who shaped the music and the scene that we listen to and was given that, you know, upper echelon status as an artist. I met him a couple of weeks before he died. He was at a gig that I went to. A truly humble, amazing guy. I spoke to him for about half an hour. I was just a punter, like, you know what I mean? He came down afterwards and got into the crowd and had a chat with people. Do you know what I mean? I was just another punter. But he spoke to me about all sorts of stuff. He was a genuinely really lovely, nice guy. And I'm very, very proud and pleased to say that I met him even for only a short period of time and only once. But it's, you know, there needs to be a massive change in the way that artists are treated and the value and respect that they're given for the work that they do, because they do put their heart and soul into it. And artists will spend their entire lives chasing a dream that may not happen for them because people aren't willing to pay them the money that they're owed. You know, there is always that starving artist. What's it called? I don't know. But, you know, people say, oh, you know, I don't want to be a starving artist. I don't want to be, you know, a musician. You know, parents are all are happy for their kids to learn musical instruments when they're growing up. But then when they turn around and say, I want to be an artist, I want to be a musician, they go, oh, no, you don't want to do that. There's no money in that. Well, why encourage them in the first place then? What's the point? So there needs to be a serious change in the way that these gatekeeper companies who are trying to democratize the music industry pay their artists. Because let's face it, if Spotify, if artists didn't want to put their music on there, then Spotify wouldn't have anything, would they? Like, these companies rely on the fact that people are creating music. And this does go back to the fact that, artists can, if they're business savvy enough, if they, do it right, don't need record labels. They don't need production houses to deliver their music to the world. They can make it all their own. They can generate enough revenue for themselves. But that's just not the way that the rest of the world sees it. So it really is time for people to start looking at different options and ultimately just paying them properly for the work they do. The bread and butter of gigs and live events has been taken away, but the other options that are out there for them for generating money, they can be good, they can be lucrative, but it requires way more investment from them than it does from us to get hold of that music. The amount of money that we have to pay to get so much more out of them just doesn't really seem fair. The Patreon account, that seems like a fairer way of doing it. You pay us some money on a monthly basis and we give you some more exclusive stuff. Merchandise is obviously a good one, but you've got to look at paying out other people. You've got to actually buy the merchandise, and then people actually have to pay for it. Do you know what I mean? And people just seem so loathed to pay for something that they like. It just seems a bit weird. Doing stuff for games, but then they might get ostracized by the community. Not just games, but games and TV and radio and stuff like that. And then people are like, you're selling out, man. So I think artists have to do themselves a favor as well and support each other. And I know that they do. I'm not saying that everyone's like, no, you don't do that. But I think that they do need to, are there music unions? I would imagine so. I don't know. I'm not a musician, right? But I imagine that there should be some sort of union for musicians to be a part of, so that they can get fairly treated. They can get things that they're owed. They can get free service. And it also comes down to the powers that be as well, have a universal system whereby all festivals have to sign up to this music accreditation service, that all clubs and bars and restaurants have to sign up for this music accreditation service. And then there's one giant network of music that's produced that has to go into these things so that people can get a fair share of their revenue, So, like I said, this was supposed to be a podcast about how people can, or how artists can generate extra revenue when, they're not able to perform, like in the global pandemic situation that we are at the moment. But it really turned out to be, a look at the way that artists aren't really able to generate revenue from things that they do and the additional work that they have to do. As ever, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this session. I would like to hear your feedback. Do you think that anything that I've said is fair? Do you think that anything that I've said is unfair? Do you think that artists have more ways than what I've spoken about? Do you not realize they had as many? How do you feel about the options that they do have available to them? How do you feel about paying £2-3 for a live stream from one of your artists? Would you, or one of your favorite artists, would you be prepared to pay that? Let us know. As ever, guys, if you've got any feedback, send it in to us at contact@amenbreaks.co.uk, or you can send us a message on Instagram or Facebook. Hopefully we will have the man Diligent Fingers back with us again soon. He's been working extra hard, doing lots of live sets, promoting his music, and hopefully we'll be having him back with us soon. We want to get more people involved on the show, so if you want to come and talk to us, drop us a note and we will be more than happy to have you on the show. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Amen Breaks UK. Send us an email, contact@amenbreaks.co.uk. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook @amenbreaksuk. And don't forget to follow Diligent Fingers on Instagram @DiligentFingers. Please, guys, if you've got anything you want to share with us, anything that you'd like us to cover, send it in to contact@amenbreaks.co.uk.